I'm Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on. Today we're looking at the Blancpain Fifty Fathoms Bathyscaphe, 43mm in brushed stainless steel. You can buy this bathyscaphe on our website, watchyouwant.com, and if you like these videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Watch You Want Inc. Now you can see on my wrist, 6 1/3 inches in circumference, 16 centimeters. This watch has a different stance and it has a different character than the 45mm 2007 to present 50 Fathoms. The analogy I'd use is that if that is like a Porsche 356, this is like a Porsche 356 Speedster. It's pared down, it's stripped down, it's more purposeful, and it really retains the essentials. So somehow, despite the fact that it's stripped down, less is more, and it's more of a pure machine with a sporting, utilitarian, purposeful character to it. And that's historically correct. The Bathyscaphe has always been the no-nonsense version of the 50 Fathoms. While they share the same movement, the caliber 13, 15, and both feature outstanding luxury refinements from a fit and finish perspective, this one's definitely different, being 13.5mm thick compared to the roughly 16mm of the 45mm case, and this one being 43mm with nice pared down lugs. You can see how they really are quite spare, both from the flanks and from the top. It wears completely different. Whereas the original looks like a Cadillac on the wrist, this one really does have more of a sports car feel to it. Lighter, wieldier, lower. This is a watch that you could definitely wear like a Rolex with no reservations. With a nice subdued brushed steel finish and a ceramic bezel with liquid metal inserts, this is a high quality piece that's nevertheless one ready to get wet and wild, dirty and rough. Now you can see the watch features a display case back, so from an aesthetic standpoint, this is already a departure from the conventional 50 Fathoms. What's not a departure is the movement within and the use of a supple but very durable sailcloth strap. Now you can see that it's flexible, bolstered as it approaches the case. It's also nicely lined with a rubberized insert on the bottom with a slightly contrasting stitch, gray to the black, so it feels nice and smooth against the skin, and with a simple but beautifully finished faceted brushed metal pin buckle, the upscale details are there. But as a whole, this is a watch that looks a lot more aggressive from a sporting perspective than the somewhat patrician 50 Fathoms. Now moving inboard from the faceted and brushed metal case, you can see the bezel isn't quite as dominant a feature as it is on the original 50 Fathoms, but that's not for want of technology or content. Unidirectional rotating as ever. It has a very crisp, audible, and tactile detent to it. You can really feel it through the fingertips. It's neither too easy to turn nor so resistant that you'd struggle if your fingers were wet or gloved, and the insert is ceramic, so it's a nice black gloss, the only gloss part of the watch. Gloss black ceramic insert's going to basically deflect scratches. It's actually somewhat more durable than the original sapphire insert that the 50 Fathoms made famous in the modern era, so being completely flush and made of ceramic, you've got an extra measure of durability here and scratch resistance. Plus, you have what's known as Omega and Blancpain's liquid metal technology. It's essentially an amorphous grain metallic that's melted in and bonded to the ceramic, not just exceptionally scratch resistant, but it gives that metallic luster within the polished ceramic that creates a real standout visual impression, especially in direct light. And being bonded, it's never going to come out. Durability incarnate. Now the dial, again, it's a little bit more subdued than the traditional 50 Fathoms, but it makes the most of what's there to great effect. All polished white gold applied indices with white gold hands. You can see a little bit of a vintage touch in the broad rectangular form of the hands. Now that's true to the original 1960s 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe models. While this is far larger and more premium in presentation than finish, you do have that little visual nod to history. Now all the printing is beautifully constrained and very crisp, even under the loupe. What sets this watch apart, even more than the calibrations and the printing from the traditional 50 Fathoms, is that it is a sunburst anthracite metallic dial. So you have a reflective property that you don't have on the lacquered bezel of the traditional 50 Fathoms. It has a completely different visual impression, and it's magnified the brighter the light gets. Because it is sunburst, you do get a dazzle effect. You do get a reflection that's a little bit chaotic, a little bit scattered. It isn't quite the gloss sheen of the 50 Fathoms. The Bathyscaphe has a personality all its own. Now nice and thin, you can see that the case is simply finished, but it's not to say that it is simple. It has a beautiful chamfer on the lug. You can see how many facets the lug has from this angle, and all of this is executed by hand. Quite beautiful to see. There's a gorgeous contrast in the vertical graining between the lugs and the horizontal graining of the flanks of the case. Moving down and around, we get back to the case back. Now here the 50 Fathoms caliber 1315, designed expressly for sports watches, is the star. When the original 50 Fathoms bowed in 2007, it had a solid case back for the sake of anti-magnetism. There was a soft iron cage inside to shield the movement. Now, as of the 2013 debut of the Bathyscaphe model, we have a silicone hairspring, which is inherently amagnetic, so it can't be magnetized. Blancpain is able to retain the 300-meter water resistance here, that's 1,000 feet of water resistance, while opening up the case back for display, and you still have that anti-magnetic property, so it's the best of every world. You can see the movement, it's anti-magnetic, and we still have a deep-diving, proper sports watch. But the 1315, based on the 13RO dress watch movement, has some properties that are exceptional by the standards of a dive watch. For one thing, 3 mainspring barrels coupled in series. Now what this means is you get a full 5 days or 120 hours of power reserve. Automatic winding and highly efficient. It's also incredibly tough. 35 jewels and 227 parts, and all of them are finished to a standard you would expect of the likes of something like a Vacheron, or perhaps even an Audemars Piguet. Blancpain does not cut corners, and these movements are built by Blancpain's movement partner, Frédéric Piguet, which does in fact supply movements to both Vacheron Constantin and Audemars Piguet. So the anglage here, something almost unknown in a 300-meter sports watch, is beautiful. It's broad. You can actually see the edges of these bridges lighting up as I move it through the light. All of the screw heads are polished. Their slots are chamfered. There's a gorgeous brushed finish, not a Côte de Genève, but a sort of grained dressage on all the bridges, and a gorgeous satin with a little bit of a almost grained texture to this blackened 18-karat gold winding mass. It is a free-sprung balance. Operating at 4 Hertz, it has the anti-magnetic hairspring, which is also very shock and thermally resistant. It's the free-sprung balance itself that gives the greatest degree of shock resistance, though. Unlike the traditional dress watch movements that powered the earliest modern 50 Fathoms in the late 90s and early 2000s, this is free-sprung. So what you have is a balance that cannot be altered, permanently altered, by a shock that moves the timing index, traditionally a little lever. The index is screwed in place and fixed, and instead inertia weights on the circumference of the balance wheel are moved in and out to change its rate. Very tough. It's also a reasonably thick movement, and that's something you want in a sports watch, whereas the original 50 Fathoms of the early 2000s, the modern era 50 Fathoms, I should say, were powered by a Piguet 1150, which was a thin movement, just over 3 millimeters in thickness. This is over 5.5 millimeters thick, which means it can be built sturdier, both in terms of its gear trains and the bridges themselves. All elements are very tough. So this is a bomber movement that can easily hit and exceed COSC timing standards. In fact, we timed this one consistently at +2 seconds over 24 hours, regardless of position. Very advanced, also very precise. When you unscrew the crown, because it does have that chronometer grade timing potential, it does have the ability to hack its seconds, stop the balance, and freeze the seconds hand. So whether you're using it as a true dive watch and you're synchronizing it to a dive timer, or you just want to set it to an atomic clock on your home computer, the ability to get precise synchronization is here. Mechanically, everything you get in the 50 Fathoms 45, you get in the Bathyscaphe 43. What you don't get is perhaps the somewhat self-consciously pompous, one might even say pretentious, standard of finish on the standard 50 Fathoms. While I like that Cadillac look, not everyone does. Some feel that a tool watch should have a sailcloth strap that's bomber tough. It should have a discreet brushed steel case. It should have a dial that's beautifully made and legible, but not extrovert and flamboyant. It should have a bezel that's crisp, that turns and stays where it's put, but it shouldn't necessarily have a rich, billowing sapphire cap. If you're the type who wants luxury finish and high horology, clockwork, watchmaking, engineering, finish when you look for it, but not when you don't, the Bathyscaphe is the perfect solution. A Blancpain from the inside out. Nevertheless, It's bomber tough and ready to go toe-to-toe with the best tool watches from Breitling, Rolex, and Omega. It really is the best of both worlds for above the waves or below. You can see this Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe, 43 millimeters in stainless steel on our website, watchyouwant.com.